Well, good afternoon and welcome to our powered by Jitterbit EMEA partner Activate kickoff. I am proud, we are proud and thankful to have you here on this event. And again, thanks for taking your time to learn more about both the development around the Harmony platform and what the direction is of Jitterbit. Just a quick note that all our lines are on mute today and we will have Q&A at the end of the presentation. If questions come up for you, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will ensure to track and answer them all. The session will be recorded and afterwards will be sent through to your. My name is Steve Schiffman. I'm the VP for multi-channel sales here in EMEA, meaning managing the enterprise sales team, the commercial market sales team, and recently added the alliances team. And I've been with the company for a short 2 years. Interesting 2 years, as you know, that our space is interesting. It feels that the iPaaS market is growing. It's in a wave, and it's growing with over more than 20% per year, especially in the upper mid market and low end of enterprise. And that is where we play. Next to me today, the presentation will be held by our field CTO, Keith Rick. Maybe you want to say a word, Keith?
Yes, thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everybody. Pleased to be presenting to you today, and yeah, a warm welcome from myself and the rest of the speakers. Most of you will have spoken with me and maybe even worked with me. As Steve says, I kind of occupy a field CTO role in the region of EMEA. I also head up the sales engineering function and kind of serve operationally as the chief architect. So very much looking forward to the session today. Thank you, Steve.
Yes, and David Barker, very happy to also welcome in the partner delivery management role. Maybe David, you can say a few words about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Steve, and hello, everybody. My name's David Barker. As Steve said, I'm transitioning into the partner delivery manager role here at Jitterbit. I'm currently an integration architect here at Jitterbit, so knee deep and in the weeds in lots of customer projects. So plenty of field experience, of course, to help you guys along with your delivery of your projects. So yeah, I'll be doing some presentations later on in product for you, and then moving forward, helping along your journey of enablement.
Great, thanks. Good. Well, some of you might have joined part 1 of today, where we talked about the global strategic direction, the EMEA strategic direction, and the partner program framework. Let me just take the opportunity to shortly highlight a few words on the EMEA strategic direction. So many of you, you're all long-standing partners, and yeah, we are very grateful for your long-standing loyalty and hard work. And you know that we started off in the Salesforce and Oracle NetSuite ecosystems. But as society and the partner community evolve, as well as our own strategy, we want to embrace both our historical revenue and key partnerships coupled with fanning out to the new hot spaces like e-commerce with vendors like Magento, BigCommerce, and Shopify, for example. We call those technology ecosystems SaaS. Given the ambitious and aggressive growth strategy that we formulated together with, what's happening here, sorry, that we formulated with our new investor, Orange Group, who joined the family last November, we intend to deliver the following in 2021 and beyond. First thing is scaling our own business through organic and inorganic growth in the coming 12 to 36 months. And in the inorganic part, we also have emphasis on looking on the European region. Number 2, the channel as the number 1 go-to-market strategy. My analysis clearly indicates that joint efforts increases win rates and increases deal size on both ends. Build, increase, and leverage the competence of a channel with investing in the team and specifically adding technical resources to the team for both pre and post-sales support. Specifically in EMEA, we are fully committed to driving the business into our what we call solar system strategy, meaning technology ecosystems within the European region. with focus on also the SAP, the Microsoft, the Adobe ecosystems. Product positioning wise, we are combining domain expertise with integration experience. Just being able to deliver integration isn't enough anymore. So with pre-built solutions around the life cycle of a customer, the life cycle of an employee from hire to retire, the life cycle of a product from design to after service, we can better hit the bullseye when we are solutionizing for customers. Therefore, we have also brought to market the Jitterbit marketplace. It is in beta. And the good thing about it is that it will also be a marketplace and exchange for our partners to sell their solutions and services. So going forward, if you deliver a project and create templates, custom connectors, or other solutions, you will be able to monetize them in the marketplace. Then number 6, where a lot of our competitors lean towards the data space, we believe in delivering acceleration of automation and business critical solutions to help the world bounce back from this, so to say, post-COVID year. So we will lean in our roadmap towards the automation space with the RPA and IBPMS players. We already have BMC and Genpact as OEM partners, and we are also connected within the leading RPA players. Last but not least, we want to hit our objectives and KPIs and supporting our partners through collaboration in both the challenging times as the good times to come. At least we have demonstrated that in the last 12 months, hopefully also to you. Good. Short overview. Let's dive into the good stuff, and I hand it over to Keith.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, so we'll quickly provide an overview of the agenda for today's session, and then we'll kind of get stuck into the content itself. One thing to call out now, just as a heads up for later on in the session, we will be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the back end. So if you have any questions that spring to mind immediately, or of course throughout the presentation whilst David and I are talking about certain parts of today's session, or even the product demonstration itself, please post those as they come to mind, and we'll have a decent Q&A session at the back end. So moving on from that, in terms of the session itself, it starts now at 3:15 or a few minutes after, and we're planning to run for around an hour to an hour and 15 with that 15-minute Q&A at the back end. And the first thing we're going to hit is API 360, what it is and what that means for you as our partners, and how that's reflected in the Powered by Jitterbit 2.0 program benefits as well. I'll touch on the differences and the pros and cons and the benefits of custom versus repeatable solutions. And there's 3 or 4 different definitions there it's important to be clear on, and how we might be working together differently, differently in a good way together going forwards. Then we're going to jump into the product and the platform itself. And between David and I, we'll give you an overview. It's high level. We're not getting into too much detail today. It's more kind of making you aware of the newer advancements and the innovation in the platform and the product, and introducing you to some of the newer releases that we've brought to market. So we'll touch on Cloud Studio as a focal point, Connector Builder. We'll talk about the Connector Builder SDK. We won't cover API management in its entirety, but we will touch on certain newer features and enhancements within the APIM part of the platform. And then we'll talk about the new and exciting marketplace, which is now released, and also some future plans connected to the same. Process templates, we're going to give some examples, and David actually later on will do a live deployment from a process template through to a Cloud Studio project and take you through the key aspects of that. And then we'll have a roundup talking about the partner action plan. Essentially, it's a small number of call to action tasks, hopefully for you to take away and engage with us on a one-to-one basis thereafter, so we can move together more successfully and grow and better serve our customers. And of course, Q&A at the end. Okay, so I'll start by explaining what our API 360 solution strategy is. It's a framework to help all of us think about the integration problems that we need to solve in the modern enterprise, emphasizing the modern enterprise. Obviously, things have changed dramatically in the last 12 to 18 months. There was already a significant drive towards digital, but that's being accelerated because of COVID and people having to become more digitally at a far greater pace than ever before. So what we're encouraging people to do is to think outside of the point-to-point integration problems we're often asked to address, especially historically, and start to think more about end-to-end business processes and solving business problems and adding real value to the businesses that we engage with. So yeah, many partners and customers still see Jitterbit as an ETL tool or a point-to-point integration platform. But what our solution really is, it's a platform that helps orchestrate the many-to-many integration problem across the entire customer enterprise. And examples we'll touch on today are customer 360 and employee 360 life cycles. Both of those are on screen, but quite small. So we'll focus on them in a bit more detail in the next two slides. But what we're doing really is building repeatable process integration templates that help our customers automate processes across their entire IT estate, their application portfolio, cross-functionally, end-to-end business processes being automated. In essence, it's a rapid deployment solution that we're bringing to market so that you can have higher value conversations with your customers and focus on the things that matter to them and not be stuck in the product doing the low-level nuts and bolts work, which is really just reinventing the wheel from one project to the next. So we're trying to unburden you of those low-level, low-value tasks so that you can have the more value-added tasks and enjoy more strategic relationships with your customers. We'll talk more about this later in the presentation, and you'll see on the next couple of slides we have some technology and consulting partners listed, or at least some placeholders. So I'll take you through those now on the next two slides. So first up is the customer API 360. And really, from my perspective, the customer API 360 spans the entire customer journey. So I'm talking about from the first contact as a prospective customer through to renewals and repeat business, but importantly, everything in between, such as ongoing customer service aftercare. So the strategy really is very much about identifying and collaborating with partners, many of whom will be on this call. And what we're looking for, they ask from us as the vendor, is for you to bring your deep domain expertise to the table and help us build solutions, or in fact build solutions on your own on top of the Jitterbit platform and help us execute the overarching API 360 strategy. So it's, as I've said, really, it's about delivering more value to our joint customers and having a stronger, deeper, more meaningful relationship going forward. So you can see we've got technology partner examples listed. So the main vendors who tend to occupy the various spaces that sit within those 360-degree wheels. But what we don't have right now, and this is something we need to work with our partner community on, and I'm sure Steve, Barry, Catherine, and the extended partner team will be focusing on this, is, you know, which partners have a desire to specialize in a particular domain, or even currently have that deep domain expertise because of their historic presence in that area. So those would be the partnerships that we're looking to forge going forwards, and would welcome those conversations offline on a one-to-one basis. If we roll forwards to the next slide, we'll see the equivalent for employee 360. Excellent. So it's the same again, essentially, as per the customer 360 on the previous slide. The difference being that we're now focused on the journey of an employee. So from first contact as a potential candidate, through HR and, you know, applicant tracking systems, and eventually to leaving the business and everything in between. So I view this as kind of covering joiners, movers, leavers, or onboarding and offboarding, as it's often referred to. And again, we're looking to engage with partners who have the deep domain expertise in the employee 360 arena. So I'll move on now to a very brief high-level overview of the partner journey, starting with the onboarding and planning phase on the left-hand side, all the way through to the selling, delivering, and building phases on the right-hand side of the slide. But a couple of things I'd like to touch on. Since launching the partner program, our partner team have been doing a lot of work in the background and also engaging with a number of partners in each region across the globe. The idea being that we have a deeper and more meaningful understanding of the journey that we need to go through together with our partners, and then refining the partner journey and the benefits and the resources needed to support our partners on that journey to become even more successful going forward. So there's a global part to play, which you will have heard about from Ron and Jennifer already. And then locally, of course, within EMEA, we're deploying this, through Steve, Barry, Catherine, and the extended partner team. So what we're looking to focus on going forward, I'm going to pick a few highlights, of course. There's a lot of things on the slide, but I'd like to highlight the new partner portal, which is being worked on. It'll be released soon, and that's going to help us streamline processes and work together more effectively. We already have a wealth of training assets and materials, including Jitterbit University, but there's a whole lot more besides. We've got updated certifications coming out and a lot of focus around Cloud Studio and the innovation that's taking place there. So if you're not already involved with the training and certification, or maybe your certification isn't up to date, or there are training courses that we've released that you're not aware of or you haven't taken, we'd very much encourage you to take advantage of those services and then work through the partner accreditation program with us. And those specialisms, that expertise that you possess on a technical level with our vendor solution, but also your deep domain expertise, they'll be showcased on our marketplace, which I'll touch on in a short while. We also have partner playbooks, including delivery readiness playbooks and solution build methodologies. So again, if you're not aware of these, or you'd like to get into more detail with them, please reach out to your point of contact in the partner team, and we can start to work through the steps together. We also have an emerging partner starter pack, so that's great for new partners or partners which are looking to maybe move into a new specialism. And then, although I think most people are aware of the DevTest.org license that you're entitled to when you become a partner, there are a number of people who have it but don't use it, and maybe even some that are entitled to it and haven't yet availed of that benefit. But it's a fantastic way to get closer to the solution, and it's kind of a prerequisite to being able to build out solutions which are relevant to your go-to-market and your customers, with support from Jitterbit's experts in terms of integration and API management. So if you're not currently using your DevTest.org to its full potential, or even if you don't have your DevTest.org enabled or available to the right people in your organization, please reach out and we can get that in place. And last but not least, we have a lot of implementation support services that we can offer as well. So ranging from scoping and estimating through to architecture and design reviews, and even working shoulder to shoulder with your professional services teams on delivery of projects. So it's a full spectrum of services provided, but we need to engage with you on a case-by-case basis to understand how we go to market together on those particular opportunities. And then I would like to also mention the Jitterbit Exchange marketplace. Marketplace is the brand name for this. We'll show this a little later on in a couple of forms, but it's a showcase to it's a place to showcase your domain expertise and also solutions that you've built on Jitterbit, and we'll touch more on that later on. Okay, so moving on to the differences between custom and repeatable solutions, and of course we want to move away from custom, which is always required to some extent, but we don't want to be reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch on every individual implementation project we embark on. So we want to move towards repeatable solutions, or having at least a higher level of reuse. So I'm going to touch on integration recipes, what they are, and the role they play, and when you should and shouldn't position them. I'm also going to touch on process templates, which then dovetail nicely into the API 360 strategy I've shared with you. And then I'm also going to finish off by talking about what options exist when an integration recipe or a process template aren't the right fit. So we have custom projects and we have repeatable solutions as well. So if we roll forwards now into the next couple of slides, I'll take you through each of those in a bit more detail. Okay, so the first two to get straight really, and these are relatively new terms from a Jitterbit standpoint. We've spent a lot of time in the last 12-18 months building out a comprehensive library of integration recipes centered around Cloud Studio, surfaced in the marketplace, which is now out of beta and generally available. And we'll show you some of these in a short while when we get into the product. And an integration recipe, as it says on the screen, is a single use case point-to-point solution So 2 endpoints, unidirectional, single object typically. So quite tactical. It's a point solution. You're not going to see high levels of reuse. So if you have those simple one-off scenarios and there's a close fit in terms of a recipe for that scenario, would be a good fit. It just accelerates the kind of time to value. Then the larger, bigger brother, if you will, of the integration recipe is the process template. And this is then a bidirectional, so two-way synchronization, typically, of 2 endpoints, multiple objects, and essentially covering that end-to-end process that we've spoken about already into today's presentation. So this is the big win. If there's a process template aligned to one of the API 360 wheels, so it could be in the customer domain or the employee domain, it's going to save you significant consulting time and allow you to then be unburdened of that low level nuts and bolts work and have those higher value discussions and maybe demonstrate a more strategic play to the customers you work with. What we've seen since we've released these is that we're typically in a 50 to 80% reduction of the build time associated with that same project had we not had the benefit of the process template. So it's a major catalyst in terms of time to value. It accelerates the time to value massively and allows you then to use that time to greater effect. So integration recipes, point solution, one-off, very tactical. Process templates, more strategic, end-to-end. If there's a process template that fits your business need, then great. But also, even if it's only a close fit but not an exact fit, you can take it and then modify it and extend it. So take the kind of adopt and adapt approach and personalize it or localize it as you see fit. Okay, and then we'll move on to custom templates versus custom projects. So a custom template, I see this kind of 2 ways. It could be a template generated by one of our partners who has the deep domain expertise in order to actually build the template in the first place and release that to the marketplace through the marketplace itself. But it also could be a process template that has been downloaded, extended, modified, maybe had extra endpoints, wired into it so that it's been localized and personalized as we've just discussed. So that's a custom template. It's a non-vendor supplied template. It's either one that you've created from scratch, although we would advise you start from one of our starter projects so you have the base building blocks in there, or it's a process template that you've used as a starting point, as a reference architecture, and you've modified it sufficiently to kind of make it your own IP. So that's a custom template. You're still benefiting from a lot of reuse, a lot of base building blocks, and you're more composing than kind of building. A custom project is what the vast majority of people would be familiar with. It's when you're more or less starting from scratch. It's a custom build, it's a unique set of use cases, the endpoints are uncommon, the use cases, are non-standard. There's too much that's different for any of the previous mentioned items to be of great help. But even then I would try to persuade people or recommend to people that you start with a starter project that has all of the reusable components, the generic stuff, error handling, logging, alerting, source and target endpoints, the things that are going to allow you to deal with the custom process project as quickly and as effectively as possible. So that's really the 4 main definitions. Obviously smallest on the far left, moving through to more sophisticated and pretty much fully built, then custom extended versions of the same, more partner created than vendor, and then custom builds, sort of blank sheet of paper on the far right. And there will always be a place for that, and sometimes it's unavoidable, but we should certainly try to have that reuse as much as possible and be more effective in those engagements where we can be. Okay, so we're nearly through the bulk of the slides, and we're going to get into the interesting stuff in a moment, start showing you the new innovations that have taken place in the product itself. And this will be a dual act between David and myself. So I'll just talk briefly about each of the 3 items on the screen and then hand over to David to take you through some of the lower level items in more detail. And this will be a show and tell as well as talking to the items. So we've got Cloud Studio, Cloud Studio is our next generation browser-based design experience. It's the successor to the Desktop Design Studio. We're not sunsetting the Desktop Design Studio, it'll coexist indefinitely, but the innovation is taking place in Cloud Studio. David will touch on connectors, and without stealing his thunder, we have a lot more connectors, and certainly the new modern SaaS endpoints that we come across frequently in Cloud Studio versus Design Studio. He'll take you through Connector Builder, what it is, and an example of. I'll talk about the Connector SDK. Then we'll move on to a bit of a kind of an overview of what's new or in the recent past or innovation that's taken place within API Manager, things like API proxying and the newer versions of OAuth 2. And then we'll finish talking about Marketplace, which initially I'll give you a high-level overview of, and then we'll talk about some examples of the Marketplace and the process templates. So David, maybe if we can just transition now into the connector side of Cloud Studio, please.
Great, thank you, Keith. Yeah, I'll take it over from here if that's okay. So as Keith mentioned, it's a new offering. We still do have Design Studio or Desktop Studio, and some of our existing partners may well be familiar with that. And it's certainly not going anywhere. But obviously the Cloud Studio is available straight from a login into the Harmony platform. It's totally cloud-based, so there's no installation required. You don't have to keep up to date with your versions of the studio. That's automatically done for you as part of our regular releases. One thing that is important to know with these is that as with the Desktop Studio projects, they all still operate on the same back end. So all of the agents or the operations that are invoked run on the same agents as they would do on Design Studio as they do on Desktop Studio. So as you can see here, we can see our list of Cloud Studio projects. No, there's no Desktop Studio projects here. We can filter on environments. Again, we have a similar import, and we can also export these projects. Because it's a cloud-based platform, we export to a JSON project, so there's no more zips, no more files to have to store locally. So if I dive into one of these here, you can see for yourself firsthand. Now, for most of you who've gone through the Jitterbit training, if you have or haven't already, as we've mentioned, I think in the last webinar and possibly at the start of this one, we are developing training content for this one, but you'll notice that from the Jitterbit Training University, a lot of that was in Desktop Studio, but the principles and learnings from that can be carried across in the same way to Cloud Studio, and that's one of the intentions here. But as Keith mentioned, a lot of the innovations in where we're trying to move with the product are being in here. So, our main development focus is now on Cloud Studio. All of our new connectors, which is already a very rich list. They are being developed with Cloud Studio in mind and will be available from within Cloud Studio. So, Cloud Studio has been developed and designed in a way to use workflows to allow us to segregate and manage your integration patterns. But that's not to say that you're isolated within each workflow to these components. You can reuse these across your workflow. So you can see in this project here, we've got a number of workflows. We've got a standard ETL pattern through from a database to Salesforce, for example. And we've also got a pattern here, which is a Salesforce outbound webhook API, which leverages an API from the Jitterbit Harmony platform and then passes that through to ultimately create some records in Salesforce. What you'll also notice here is we've tried to retain some of the same experience that you would have as a user of Desktop Studio. So you can see here, we've got the on failure paths, which allow for on failure, of course. We obviously can utilize the run operation. So you can see the canvas it's a lot cleaner, a lot nicer to look at. Obviously you can make it look nice in Desktop Studio, but we've done the hard work for you here in Cloud Studio. Moving on to the components panel here, you can easily look through your various components from your project, and it's a drag and drop where you drag them from the components panel onto the canvas. So you've got your endpoints, operations, etc., all of your transformations. And from within the transformations themselves, again, we've tried to keep that same drag and drop approach, low code approach, and just dragging fields across. So it's a fully baked studio from that perspective. And all of our solutions team are using it. Professional services team are very well adopted of this tool. So, you know, it's the place to go to start your project. There may well be use cases where you think that Design Studio is better for what you want to do. And we are still doing releases for that if necessary. And like I say, it's not going anywhere, but this is the tool where, you know, where we want to be working. As you can see on the right-hand side here, we've got all of our connectors, as I've touched on before. We've also got our baked-in connectors here. So we've got our generic HTTP connectors that allow us to do our standard REST services. So all the things that you would expect to have from Desktop Studio are also in Cloud Studio as well. So when we talk about new innovations, for example, one great feature of Cloud Studio is this project history. So what this allows is for better collaboration between multiple people working on the same project. As you can see here, I know exactly who's made a change and what that change was. What it also allows me to do is to isolate just deploys that have occurred and to actually restore specific versions of that project, which is a really powerful tool. I know ultimately we don't want to be doing rollbacks and things like that, but it's this type of innovation that's being sort of driven into this tool, and hopefully, you know, it's something that we'll continue to generate content for. Like I say, our Jitterbit University is an area we'll flourish with documentation and elements on this. But if you go to Success Central, generally everything's referenced in Cloud Studio now, and like I say, very capable of building a full project in this tool. So now to move on to connectors. One of the things Keith mentioned here is our connector builder. And again, this is a thing just for the Cloud Studio environment. So within our Cloud Studio section here within the Harmony platform, we've got the connector builder here. So what the connector builder allows for is the ability to generate a connector or bespoke connector for any HTTP REST service, which you can then use throughout any project, Cloud Studio project within your org. You can export the connector, you can import the connector into other orgs if necessary. So there's a couple of examples here, and what I wanted to do is just drill into one of these, into this MailChimp one, which I'm fairly sure all of you, if you're not aware of MailChimp, will have had an email sent by it at some point in your careers. So what this is just a wizard that allows us to take learnings from a consumed endpoint. So we'd always recommend you use something like Postman to consume an endpoint, figure out how it works, figure out how the authentication works, review the documentation of that endpoint, and then you can take those learnings and you can come into Connector Builder and apply them in here, so that then you can use that within the Cloud Studio. So we've got our name, display name, any versioning descriptions that we want to put in there. Obviously, it's always nice to have an icon of that endpoint in there, so that when you see it in the Design Studio, in the Cloud Studio canvas, you can reference it nice and easily. Authentication. Standard types are anonymous and basic. However, we do allow, of course, as you'll see in a moment, to add custom request headers, which allow us to pass, authorization bearer tokens, etc. as well. So within our connector here, we add in our base URL. So that's our base URL for our endpoint. And then the activities here allow us to configure and add in, well, we call them activities, but these you could see these as the resources for that service. So you can see here we've got get members, get events, activities, etc. We can also add in some additional global request headers as well as headers along the activity. So I'm going to drill into the members here. So again, activity name, activity display name. So what this is for is to allow us to add in the various parameters and elements that we would need or would want to surface in the Cloud Studio to make it a user-friendly experience for anybody using that connector within Cloud Studio. So what we're attributing is obviously the method, so we want to be able to get methods. Now we know that this endpoint requires us to pass in ID, so we pass in we stipulate the path parameter, it's a list ID here. We know that it can handle or take or deal with a number of query string parameters. So again, we we can stipulate what they are within the connector here, and then the additional request headers, as I mentioned before, for authorization. And what these, and I'll show you in a moment, that all of these will then be surfaced in the tool. As you can see here, we've got a response body. So again, going back to the documentation, going back to our learnings from consuming the endpoint in say Postman, we know that this is the sort of schema, or this JSON structure here is what we'll be getting back out of that connector. And the last title here is just an overview of it, but it gives you a nice overview of what your activities are, you know, what's available in the connector. Oh, there may well be an additional resource that we're going to start using more heavily. Let's just add it into the connector, and then it automatically becomes available to everybody in that organization. Does it have a request and response schema? Yes, no. You can publish it, unpublish it, delete it, test it from within here as well if you wanted to. So it's really powerful. And when you sort of think about it long and hard, I personally on projects have had to consume endpoints, use the generic HTTP connector, which is very powerful still, and still something I use very regularly. But you know, to be able to come in here, apply all those learnings once, and then be able to share that and propagate that around your org, people who use that, be able to export it and import it is great, and again another accelerator. So I'm just going to very quickly show you what that looks like in there. So this is just a blank project, just so as not to mess up one of the other ones. But as you can see here, we've got our connector. So when I click on this, as you can see, I've automatically got all of my activities that I've configured within my connector, within Connector Builder. And it's simply just a case of drag and drop, generate a new operation in there. And if I double click on it, then as you can see, I've got my path parameter, which I can populate with a project or global variable as per my choosing. Any of the query string parameters in there, which again have been surfaced from my configuration within the Connector Builder. So that sort of sums up the Connector Builder at a very high level. Obviously, you can go into a lot more detail with that, but we would sort of urge you to say, you know, go and have a go, have a try with it, and you know, see how you get on with it. Obviously, if you have any technical questions on it, then please do reach out. Or if there's any questions that you've got now, you want to put in the Q&A, then that's fine. As Keith mentioned, we do also have our Connector SDK, but I'll let Keith talk to that now.
Excellent, that's great. Thank you, David. The Connector Builder really is a great piece of innovation, and there's more to come with the Connector Builder itself as well. But it's that ability, as David said, to abstract away the complexity. So one person needs to learn about that particular endpoint, which of course could be something far less commonplace than MailChimp. And then once you've mastered that, those learnings can be baked into that connector, and it's only a small amount of work, and it's a wizard. You know, it's no code. And once that's done, those resources on the back of that API that you need as part of your project build become activities on the palette, and you can drag and drop them onto the canvas. So everybody else in the project team then is working at a far quicker pace than they would otherwise be able to do. So it's a great piece of innovation. But look, sometimes the connector or the connectivity requirements you have are more complex than that, and we don't like being without a solution at Jitterbit. So what we have here, when all of those other things are off the table, there's not an application specific connector, there's not a generic connector, there's not a connector builder, we can't use the HTTP service to consume the RESTful API. We have a connector SDK. So this then is a method. Yes, it's a development process. So you need Java skills, and you need to have the developer skill sets to do this. We do provide a working example as a reference, and it's fully documented on the developer portal on screen. But it's good to know, I think, it's reassuring to know that you have that escape hatch of going to a connector SDK, a code-based built connector that can actually be equal to the kind of first-class connectors that we ourselves build, with our engineering team. So it's good to know you can do it. It's not for everybody, of course, but I think it's important to know that that isn't a limitation. There's not a ceiling that you hit and you can't go beyond. This allows extensibility, and it allows you to build, a fully fledged connector if that's of interest to you. Now, it might be on a tough project, there's a cause to do this, but more likely, I would think, if we have partners specializing in a particular domain, and maybe there's a niche endpoint, but it's critical in your space, in your geography, in that vertical, and it's not one that's mainstream enough for us to put engineering time into building a connector for. But you could build a connector, and that could be your IP, and that could be a differentiated part of your service offering. Allows you to then have a deeper penetration into those opportunities. So worth knowing it's there, and worth exploring if you have those kind of use cases. Okay, so we're going to switch away from Cloud Studio now and go into API management. I'm not going to go through API management in its entirety, and many of you will have used this, and if you've attended some of our previous customer and partner meetups, you'll have seen us use webhook APIs and various other APIs. But one of the things I wanted to call out, because it slipped in a little bit under the radar, somewhat unnoticed, is the API proxying capability. So what we're doing here is essentially providing a proxying service. Think of it as a reverse proxy, similar to Nginx or similar. And what you can do is two things. You can either proxy a public API through the Cloud API gateway. So you then essentially adopt the API that you want to proxy, and then you broker out this new enhanced API. So you can't enrich the request response structures when you're proxying, because that part is passed through. But what you can do is overlay additional security profiles, which David is starting to show on screen now. So you could go through the publishing process on a proxy API, and you could then start to add the security profiles as overlays, which then enhance the API that you're proxying. So it could be IP whitelisting, could be authentication, could be rate limiting. It could simply just be that you want one place to publish your APIs, one place to maintain them, and then you would have one set of API logs and one set of API analytics as well, and it's all within a namespace that you then present to your customers or to the marketplace, as opposed to whatever those backend services are. So it's an interesting piece of tech. The thing to be aware of is that if it's a public API you want to proxy, the Cloud API gateway can proxy it because it has connectivity to it in order to proxy it and make the facade available to the consumers. If it's a private API you want to proxy, you would need a private API gateway, because it's the API gateway that's doing the proxying of the service that it's adopting and proxying. So just bear in mind, if it's a public API or web service you want to proxy, Cloud API gateway is fine. If it's private, one behind the corporate firewall within the perimeter of a network, you're going to need a private API gateway. It's not the private agent or the agents at all that do the proxying, it's the gateway. Other than that, it's quite a cool add-on to an already impressive piece of tech in the product. The other thing I'd like to talk to, and David's in the perfect place actually, so thank you for that. It's a recent addition to the API security profiles in terms of authentication. So we've supported OAuth2 alongside of basic anonymous API keys, which was added a while back actually. And if you're not aware of API keys, that's a really cool add-on as well for things like outbound messages from Salesforce as an example. But essentially you can choose to secure your API with an API key, and then you can either have a default key of, say, API key, or you can set the key name, and then it will also generate a GUID as the value, and you can pair that then with additional security safeguards like David is demonstrating now with an IP address whitelist. He's choosing a private one there, which wouldn't work in a public scenario, but anyhow, the principle is the same. But the OAuth2 piece, previously we supported three-legged OAuth2. We now also support two-legged OAuth2, and I'll just briefly, many of you will know the difference between the two and the reasons why it's important, but for those of you that don't or are unaware currently, three-legged auth requires user intervention. So you'll have experienced this no doubt countless times when you've been browsing the internet and you've gone to sign on to an application, and you can do a single sign-on with a social platform that you already have an account with, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, or whatever it might be. So you get that pop-up after you sign in and it says, this app is going to be able to access, these things. Are you okay with that? You grant access, it signs you on. But there's that user intervention in the middle, which is okay for some scenarios. But what we often get asked to do is the machine to machine, the system to system integration, of course, then you can't have a pop-up on screen expecting a user to grant access. So that's where two-legged OAuth comes in. The entire process is automated without user intervention. So that's great, because previously it was a limiting factor, and I believe that's GA already. And if it's not, it will be imminently available to you all and our customers. So if you've missed that, then please take a look at the release notes and feel free to test it out. Okay, and then we'll move over to oh, well, okay, yeah, actually, let's just take a quick look at API logs. We have generated some activity, David and I. We've been testing away yesterday and today. So if we have a quick look at API logs, you'll be familiar with this anyway. You can filter on environments, and you can filter on profiles and various other criteria. You can expand the logs and start to look at what information we're recording, and it depends on whether you've got debug turned on or not. I think I turned the log level up and debug on, so you got more verbose logging. But you can also switch over to the analytical view. You can start to see the trends of what's going on in your org. And top right hand corner as well, instead of last 7 days, you can change it, say, last 10 hours, and it'll give you a more kind of recent view of what's been going on. So this was David and I testing what we've built in the last week or two, yesterday and today, to make sure there was some activity there today on the screen for you to look at. But yeah, that's the type of information that you can gain access to in the web management console, specifically in the API management component. And of course, that would then span both APIs that you've published, new APIs that you've created in the Jitterbit integration plane and published through the API management module, and also proxied APIs as well. So I'll leave it there for now. If you're interested more in APIM or Connector Builder, we can do specific sessions on those topics at the next meetup. But we'll now move into the marketplace and have a quick driver around that. So yeah, I think I'll talk about the future state and really what the marketplace is there to do. I'm not going to do the demo of a deployment from a process template to a project right now, because David will do that in a short while. So we'll get to that in due course. But it's a shop window. It's a focal point. It's a repository. Call it what you will, but it's the go-to place to gain access to the great content, the valuable assets that we've spent a lot of time and energy creating, the things we've spoken about, integration recipes. You can see there are 183 integration recipes on the left-hand side. If you look at the type criteria, we've currently got 9 process templates released. 9 doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot, because those 9 process templates are fully built out end-to-end, complex, business processes. So, that's sort of the equivalent of a large project that would typically take, a significant amount of effort to generate. And that 9 is only showing what's currently generally available and released and ready for consumption. We've got, a significant number due to be released or in progress right now being built. So both of those numbers will go up, and that's the vendor supplied content. And of course, the journey for the marketplace only starts there. The end game is to have partner generated content submitted into the marketplace, available to different audiences even, and not just recipes and templates, but connectors, and also listing your expertise as well. So one of the things we're working on in parallel, you've got the private version of the marketplace, which is available to subscribing customers of Jitterbit, as David has just shown a short while ago. And depending on your entitlements and depending on your subscription tiers, you'll see the appropriate assets, and they'll be available for you to consume, or at least they'll be there to raise your awareness they exist. And there might be extra content behind, gated paywalls or registration processes. But what we're also doing in parallel is launching a public searchable version of the marketplace on the Jitterbit website, almost a microsite within the larger website. So phase 1 is that you'll be able to see the recipes and templates, but also partner solution expertise and what our partners and service providers are able to do for customers of Jitterbit. So kind of circles back to the point I was making earlier. A call to action really is to talk to us about the go-to-market plans you have. Make us aware, if we're not already aware, of the deep domain expertise you have. Is there a niche in the market that you see in a particular vertical or a certain geography? Is there an endpoint where you have that kind of specialist knowledge of that isn't easy to replicate or acquire. How can we leverage that jointly together and better serve our customers? And then in future phases, you'll be able to add connectors, additional recipes and templates, and as I've said, partner built and delivered content in there as well. Okay, so we'll just look at a couple of examples quickly, and then I'll hand the mic back to David to take you through a live deployment of a process template. But I'd like to just quickly share a couple of examples before we do that to provide context and set the scene, and then David will show you this in action. But process templates are essentially pre-built integration packages that accelerate the time to value on typically common use cases, but it doesn't have to be common use cases within the API 360 lifecycle. So the example on screen right now is NetSuite ERP to BigCommerce order to fulfillment. And what we're doing here is we're showing you on the left-hand side of the slide the relevant API 360 wheel, the customer experience 360 wheel in this case, and then the highlighted segment in the bottom right of that circle is showing you the extent at which this template covers that overall API 360 wheel. So you can see we're sort of starting after CPQ, but before ERP, and we're going through the logistics phase of that particular wheel. The center of the slide is describing the source and target endpoints. So we know we're dealing with Oracle and BigCommerce, but it could be a different ERP and a different commerce platform. There would be a different template for that, but it would be recognizable. It would be closely related. The patterns, the logic, the business rules would be similar. And even if we've not yet released a template for the exact logos that you're interested in, if there's a close fit functionally, but technically it doesn't match the particular tech stacks, it would be possible, as I said earlier, to take that process template and use it as a reference point, use it as a starting point to create a custom template, which you could then submit back to us as a partner generated asset. So we've got NetSuite, and then we've got BigCommerce, and then horizontally you can see the different objects that we're including on the source and the target and how they map to one another. So customer as an object or entity in Oracle is customer in BigCommerce, but then we've got item, which maps to product, and sales order to order, and fulfillment to shipment. So it's kind of giving you a very high level functional overview of the intent behind this particular template. And on the right hand side, we're kind of calling out in bullet point form the problems that we're solving here, but it is about solving business problems and not giving that kind of end-to-end capability to automate business processes, typically transitioning through different tech stacks, different departments, different functional domains within that particular organization. And being able to do that in a far shorter time can only be a good thing when you think about the value that you can then demonstrate to your customer. So hopefully you can kind of see the direction this is going, and we'll continue to build this content, but we're asking our partner community to support us on this journey and to kind of fast track the generation of this content. So another example would be the Jitterbit Salesforce to NetSuite CPQ configure price quote through to billing process template. And as you can see, this is covering a much larger section of the API life cycle of a customer. So not quite 2/3, but not far from that, certainly more than half. So we're starting right back at the opportunity stage. We're doing the CPQ piece alongside the quotation. We're doing that quote to order conversion. We're going through to invoices and even payments, and that could include cash collection and credit control activities as well. We're not though covering the shipping, the pick, pack, post, shipping, delivery aspect. But there would be other templates that then cover that segment or even overlap with the one we're looking at here. Okay, I think we have one more on the next slide as well. Absolutely, there we go. So we've got the Salesforce to NetSuite opportunity order. So it's a shorter one. We're starting more at the opportunity and sales type process, going through the quotation process, may or may not include CPQ depending on the use case, and through to order, but then we're not going deeper into the ERP arena. So there's some overlap, and there's different templates for different use cases. It depends on the breadth of the use case you're being charged with tackling, but there'll be templates in due course that complete the entire API 360 wheel and then provide subsets of that and overlap so that you have flexibility in terms of choosing the right template for any given particular challenge. Okay, and now I'm pleased to announce the talking and the slides are going to take a short break, and David will do a great job of taking you through the actual product, and you'll see a live deployment of a process template through to a project, and we'll touch on a couple of the highlights along that journey as well.
Thank you, Keith. So I've just switched back to the marketplace that we were in before, and as Keith says, I'm going to take the CPQ to billing process template and put that in place to a degree at a high level, so that you can see how quick that is to get it into an active project, into Cloud Studio, so that you guys would be able to take it away from there. So within the marketplace itself here, I've just filtered down on Salesforce and NetSuite, so I can get my tile here. Of course, you can just search on CPQ to billing. We've got a number of different views for this, which is very nice. On the main tile, and also if I hit Start Project here, what happens at the first stage is we provide you with a level of documentation. So for each process template, this is a PDF, which basically provides you with an overview of, firstly, the assumptions that we have about the endpoints, any prerequisites that need to be configured prior to implementing the process template, and then the steps that you would need to follow to get this to a state where it would be operational. So alongside that as well, we obviously give you any supporting files that you may need. So for example, a Salesforce file for generation of new fields, for example, and a way that you would need to configure this. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm just going to hit next. Now, what this process template will do is actually generate a number of projects within my Cloud Studio org, and allow me to select the environment within which I wish to generate those. So I'm just going to give it a prefix name. You could be a bit more clever about this, but I'm just going to put today's date. Do it correctly, it'd be nice. As you can see, that's going to prefix each one of the individual projects with that. I'm going to select my development environment, but of course you may just have your default development test as per your org. I'm going to hit create projects. So as I said, what this is going to do now is it's going to generate those 5 projects within my environment. Each project has been pre-built, of course, to a degree. Now, what these projects are, and I know Keith mentioned this before, and you probably heard it in the other webinars as well, is ultimately they are an accelerator. Every single project you'll do for a customer will require some level of customization. Every customer wants slightly different business use cases satisfying. They may have custom fields that they want to adopt and integrate in between the 2 endpoints. So don't see this as an immediate plug and play. It will automatically run and everything's good. If they want a vanilla solution and that's what they've got, then yes, it may well be. But certainly, we expect you to want to get into it and dive into those projects and start customizing them for your project, because it is an accelerator. So from here, those projects have been created, which is great. I can go back to the marketplace if I want to, but I'm going to nip to Cloud Studio now. So as you can see here, my projects have been imported. I'm going to choose the top one, which is the bidirectional sync of the accounts and the contacts. Now, the first thing I guess to mention here is that this is a Jitterbit project. To the extent that you are now the owner of this project, you can do whatever you'd like to it. The main point with this is that ultimately you can create a custom project from scratch, and as Keith said, there can be some hard yards there to do that. We've done a lot of the hard yards for you. We've also incorporated the best practices with regards to architecture of that interface, included the error handling and alerting, and effectively done it to best practice. So these solutions and process templates have actually been developed by our dedicated solutions team within Jitterbit, and also reviewed and worked on by our professional services team as well, to ensure that it all adheres to what you'll need to be using going forward. But like I say, just to touch on a few points within it, we utilize some controller scripts to orchestrate the project correctly. We've got some pagination in there as well. We've got, as you can see here, our on failure lines going down to our on failure operations, which would then generate email alerting when we configure it. We include some logging and roundup notification at the end of a process run. All of this, now it's in your domain. You can configure and remove stuff, add stuff. You may well want to enrich some data, add some custom fields, do whatever you want to in that perspective. But as you can see on the left-hand side here, we've got the 4 workflows. We've got the Salesforce accounts to NetSuite customers and bidirectionally back, and same for the contacts. Now, when you look at endpoints as well, as you can see in here, we've got 2 of our sons, Salesforce and NetSuite. They've been pre-configured to utilize the project variables. So if we go to the project variables screen, and again, this is all within our documentation. I won't scroll all the way down to it, but basically it gives you a step-by-step guide of what each one of these project variables does and what you need to put within it. So ultimately, from a configuration perspective, all you need to do is come into here, add in your relevant endpoint credentials for, in this instance, Salesforce and NetSuite, for your alerting, your email SMTP servers, URLs, etc., and the username and password for the account, and who you want to be the recipients of those. Of course, you can add to these if you want to. You may well want to do logging to a database, an additional system, add in Slack. You may well have an alternate system you want to use, another endpoint, sorry, that you've built a connector for using our connector builder, and you can interface with that. So as I said, it's, consider it 50 to 80% of the project, the core foundations of what you would need to do for you then to build upon and accelerate and, ultimately deliver the project to your customer as you would see fit. Ultimately, that's what it is. We can drill down into all of these and what they do. But if you want to get your hands on one of these, then reach out to our alliances team, partner managers. These can be enabled by yourselves if necessary, but you can also leverage the professional services team to implement these for you and work with the customer to do that. So it's a very fluid way of delivering a project correctly and efficiently to the customer. Keith, is there any other extra points you want to add to that piece?
No, that's great. Thank you, David.
Okay. So yeah, we'll move on now to the next section.
Okay, so we're approaching the end of the session actually, and hopefully moving into a fairly interactive Q&A. We've had 1 or 2 questions in already, which is good, and I expect more will shortly follow. But just in terms of a wrap up, in terms of the partner action plan, so we would say, please, we would encourage our partners to leverage the Powered by Jitterbit program, frameworks, tools, resources, the many things that we make available to you. We would also encourage, advise, persuade you to take the recommended training. Could be refreshers, could be training courses released since you last did your training and certification, or it could just be pay more interest in the Cloud Studio and APIM type courses, which maybe you haven't had exposure to at some point in the past. If you haven't, make sure you've got your dev test license benefit enabled and that you are benefiting from that. In terms of opportunities to engage, we'll be doing partner surveys. We have advisory councils on things like Exchange, the Portal 2.0, product roadmap, etc. And if you would like follow-on sessions, then please email partnermarketing@jitterbit.com or make contact with your usual point of contact in the partner team. Okay, so we'll say thank you for your participation and your attendance thus far. And if you do have any follow-on questions or any feedback, feel free to email alliances@jitterbit.com. But we'd also now open the floor to Q&A and start to answer the questions which we've got in the queue. But if you have any questions you'd like to ask, now is the time. Whilst you get busy typing, I'll take the first question in the queue. We have a great question in here, and it's okay, so there's a reference to the RAD pack, which many of you will know and be familiar with and will have benefited from. The RAD pack was really something that the best practitioners of Jitterbit built. It wasn't productized like the process templates in Marketplace, so it was a precursor to the now official reuse process templates that we've built, Design Studio focused. And the question was, hi guys, can we expect a RAD pack for Cloud Studio as well? So in essence, the process templates that we're delivering, and to a lesser extent, the integration recipes, will negate, or at least partially negate, the need for the RAD pack. But what I would say is we should create some generic templates, not process templates, but generic templates that include the base building blocks. So all the common core reusable artifacts and assets that you would want. So it's not file new blank project, it's file new and I've got a starter pack with most of my usual assets that I use commonly in just about every project. And then you can extend from there. You're not starting from a blank canvas. Obviously, if there is a closer fitting process template, that would be the go-to. And then what we would work towards is commonality of the base building blocks across the technical templates, the generic templates and the process templates. So long answer, in short, yes, but not quite in the same way. Okay, so there's another one in here, just jumping over to the chat, not the Q&A a second. What pattern would Jitterbit use and compare with API led for MuleSoft? Okay, yeah. Right, so I mean, MuleSoft will talk about things like system APIs, process APIs, experience APIs, and I'll talk about API first. We do all of those things, we just refer to it in different terms. So we can have multi-layered APIs if we want to have. You don't always need to. You can create composites or hybrids and not have to have those 3 layers, which can be quite time-consuming and complex. There is a place for that, of course. It's really down to the design principles and patterns that you want to adhere to during the build phase of your project. So we do what we call API first, but it's more like API reverse in a way, because you build it from the inside out as opposed to from the outside in. So whereas other solutions I'm aware of, you can almost scaffold out the integration workflows from the design of the API, from the contract of the API you're building, we take the opposite approach, because the API manager for us isn't a separate stack, it's a module within the Harmony platform, and it wraps around and adds value to the integration plane. So you build the integration flows in the integration plane, or think of it like this, you're building an operation that is intended to become an API as you surface it through the API manager. So the transformations are really the request response schemas of the API that you're building. So you start there, you build that out, you make sure it's almost working in a kind of a test harness mode, and then you publish that through the innovative 4-step no-code publishing wizard, at which point it automatically generates the Swagger or Open API specification documents for you, and you can then have that published into the developer and consumer portal. So you end up with the same goal, it's just that the integration flows aren't being built from the Swagger, it's the other way around. You build the integration flows and it creates the Swagger for you as part of the publishing wizard. Okay, questions coming in thick and fast, give me a moment please.
I could take the first one if you want to talk the second
Excellent.
one.
Yeah.
So yeah, questions come in. If we need to consume external API web services on-prem from Jitterbit workflows with cloud agents only in environment, do we need to contact Jitterbit to set up connectivity with those on-prem network? How can this be done? So ultimately, the framework or that you would need to adopt if you can't expose your on-prem services externally to our cloud agents would be to install private agents within or behind the DMZ where your on-prem services live. That way, your operations would be run from that agent. So that way they would have connectivity to both the on-prem services and also any cloud services that you would want as well. We do have people who have a hybrid approach, because ultimately your environments are linked to your agent groups. So you may well want to have a number of projects on environments that are cloud only, and then just have a project running on an environment that is just linked to your private agent groups to surface those on-prem endpoints as APIs, which you can then consume from your other one. Now, you have to obviously bear in mind hit limits here and how you want to do that. So it's just something to consider, but that's ultimately the way that you would do that.
That's great. Thank you, David. So yes, there are 2 or 3 different ways in which that can be done. David's taking you through 1 or 2 of those. You can use hybrids of cloud agents and private agents to kind of bridge that gap. You can do what David has spoken about, and you can also use things like reverse proxies to allow you to securely traverse that public and private domain. It's a complex area, but it's one that we make relatively simple with the various options we provide within the Harmony. But we'd need a little bit more information than the question itself in order to advise on the best or recommended best practice route. So feel free to reach out and share the details, and we can sketch out architecture diagrams for you, etc. So another question there, are there plans for version control management for projects environments? It's already there out the box, except for the fact that we're not numbering the versions. So David showed you the project history and the full audit trail of those changes, and also the deployed checkpoints. It's auto saving in real time in Cloud Studio. It's multi-developer capable. So as you saw in the demonstration, David and I had been in the same project at the same time, making different changes and submissions, and then having that fully audit logged and being able to roll back to not just the previous version, but any version that we choose to roll back to, bearing in mind that that's within, or that's for that project within that environment. That scope would be the development environment. It would typically be in real life part of something like a DTAP type scenario, so development, testing, acceptance, production. So then you'd have your different versions of the project deployed in those different environments as part of your release to service. And then you would have different checkpoints of that project within that environment. So there's multiple levels, because we don't say that you can only promote up, you can demote back down. So if you got yourself into a situation where you've made a series of changes and you can't get back to the last good known working condition, you could go to the higher environment and then migrate it back down, essentially regressing the version of the project in that lower tier and taking it back to a good known working point. So unless you were to deliberately scrub all of your dynamic checkpoints and backups and then promote the project through all the environments, including into production, etc., you should never be without a recovery point. You do it for all. There's a follow-on question coming in now as well to do with that. But if you do roll it back, yes, of course, you roll it back at a project level, and that's for all developers. So it's not a branching strategy where you've got like a dev master and each developer's got their own. You are working on a shared version of that particular solution. There are plans in the roadmap to address that, but you can do that by having your own development. So you can have the equivalent of an environment that would be dev master, and then you can have dev person 1, dev person 2, dev person 3, and then you've got that isolation at an environment level, which would solve that problem. So it really depends on the size and complexity of the project, how many people are going to be involved, are they in different squads, how are you planning to divide and conquer the work packages that you're working on. Again, if we can get more details, we can advise on the best approach, because it does differ if you're dealing with maybe 10, 20 developers in different squads with overlapping work packages versus 1 or 2, for instance. Okay, I'm going to let David take the one on logs, and I'll take the one on agents. So let me just read the two questions. So David, maybe you can start on the logs question, and I'll pick the next one up.
Yeah,
straight after.
Obviously it's a perception of why is the logs very slow is the question, just to be very blunt with it. Now, what I'm going to do here is just very quickly, sorry, when my keyboard wakes up, switch back to Design Studio, Cloud Studio, sorry, and just nip back to a project I was in previously. So within, as I mentioned before, the backend that is used in both Desktop Studio and Cloud Studio is basically is the same backend. So it utilizes the same logging framework and the agent framework. Now, obviously, within Cloud Studio, we are running a web interface. So when we're calling for logs, for example, we're opening up a new page that calls the APIs, which then get back our log information. So when you right-click on a operation, for example, that has been configured in a way where it's got a number of child or dependent operations that are run, say, for example, from your controller script, not using the onSuccess, and you hit your view logs there, and as you can say, basically we're loading up the web form and automatically I don't know, that was pretty quick to me. I don't know about you, but one of the good things about Cloud Studio is that once you've got this particular screen open for that particular operation, when you hit that view logs, it doesn't have to reload that page. When we hit refresh here, it will automatically go in and obviously refresh that to the new time. But from within here, you can drill down, you know, quite quickly. And as I was mentioning before, if I just click view logs again on this particular operation, it immediately jumps back to this and does a refresh for it. So are they slow? I wouldn't say so. I think there's ways you can see it quite quickly. If you wanted to drill down into a specific operation, again, that would open up in a new tab. So say I was doing some development on this particular operation, sorry, and I just wanted to just monitor this one and not have to bring down the full stack of logs each time, then I would probably just have this one tab open, and every time I ran my project, I would just come in here and say, okay, view logs, and it would just ping me back to this one and do a quick refresh. So there are ways around doing it, and you know, like I say, it's a bit of perception, but you know, in terms of seeing your operation logs quickly, it's, in my opinion, on par with seeing them in Design Studio as well. So I hope that answers the question, and you can sort of see that working quite quickly from this particular project.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, David. And there's a question in to do with agents, and is it possible to set up a VPN connection between Harmony and the on-premise systems? The short answer is no, not from our cloud infrastructure, because it's SaaS and multi-tenanted, and we don't provide, you know, we're not a VPN provider. But you can do that with private agents, which could be in a hosted environment, AWS as your own virtual private cloud or cluster, and then use, you know, generic or AWS or as a VPN connectivity, or reverse proxies, as I mentioned earlier. The question I answered earlier on to do with API led and comparing the way we do things to MuleSoft, just want to circle back to, because it was a paragraph or two, and there was another question in there that I missed, but it's actually quite a good question for us, because it's something we've got a good story around. So it goes on to say, for instance, if we were developing an integration between e-commerce and an OMS system, and then the OMS system gets swapped out, but the e-commerce system remains the same, is that a redevelopment? Are you having to throw your integration and your API in the bin and start again? Well, no, you'll be pleased to hear, because what we normally advocate, even when we don't know if that's going to happen, is to introduce common models as a form of abstraction, a virtual data hub, if you will, between the source and target endpoint. So they're not tightly coupled, they're loosely coupled with a common model in the middle, provides that abstraction, and it provides immunity to what would otherwise be brittle and breaking changes. I can talk at length about this. It's one of my favorite topics. So if you'd like to get in touch offline, I can take you through how that works. But in essence, what you're doing is you're mapping from the vendor-specific proprietary e-commerce solution in the source of the transformation to a common model or a canonical data model, and that's your own uniform representation of that same data, that same entity, and then you come from that same common model to the target or targets. So it allows you to do things like dynamic routing to more than one OMS system, for instance. Let's say they've got multiple subsidiaries in different geographies that run on different OMSs, but they've got one front-end commerce platform. You can do that type of thing quite easily. And then if they start to consolidate or they change those OMS systems, it's just wiring or rewiring that one spoke, maybe changing your routing logic, but the bulk of your solution remains intact. And the consumers upstream are completely unaware of the fact that OMS system would have changed. It's actually in the demo project that David's been in. I do this with one front-end CRM and multiple back-end ERPs for just the very reason that I've outlined. So happy to share that with you, but yeah, it's certainly doable.
I just wanted to very quickly circle back to that question, just show some additional elements there. And for the sake of time, whilst Keith was talking there, I just ran this operation, and I'm sure as you're all glued to the screen, you saw that you know, we had a real-time update of that operation and what it was doing. So we had running and then success with info and success, because we've not logged any information with that operation. But now what I can do is obviously click on that, and again immediately drills back down into the logs for there. So there are ways and means of getting back to those logs very quickly. And, you know, just as a high level, even if you didn't want to drill into the logs, you know, when you run it and you know, if it errors, it would say error, for example, there. But it's just enrichment or, you know, additional features that that we're adding into this tool.
Yeah, thank you, David. And we have one last question in, but I'm not entirely clear on what the question means. I think it means, well, possibly it's talking about the browser that you use, maybe in terms of compatibility or speed of painting the canvas when there's a large amount of operations in your workflow. Yes, browser, okay, because it says recommended navigator, so I wasn't quite sure. Unless I'm mistaken, I think Chrome is our best supported and recommended browser. Not to say others aren't supported, but I think Chrome is what most users of Jitterbit use, as far as I'm aware. It's certainly what I tend to live in. I can double check with product and engineering.
Yeah, we list 3 on our website, which is Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. The astute amongst you may well have noticed that I'm using Brave. I've only recently just switched to this actually, but it's a Chromium-based browser anyway. So I have also used Opera as well, but you know, we say Chrome, Firefox, or Safari. As you can see here, if things do get a little bit complicated, you can use inbuilt things like zoom out if you wish. Obviously, it makes a lot of things smaller, but you know, if you've got really large projects, it can help. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so we'll say thank you very much for your attendance today, and also for the good participation there in the Q&A section. And if there aren't any final questions, we'll wait a small moment or two. Then we'll say thank you and goodbye, and look forward to talking with you again on future sessions.